Coming up in this episode of the Innovating Higher Ed podcast, Dr. Norma Jones welcomes Dr. Garrick Grace, Director of Professional Development at the California Virtual Campus. Dr. Grace shares insights on integrating cutting-edge technology, including extended reality, XR, into classrooms, discusses how faculty can harness AI to spark student engagement, and explores why technology can enhance belonging rather than divide us. Join us as we boldly explore new frontiers in educational innovation.
How are you?
Hi, Dr. Jones. I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing well. So this is so cool. We met at Cupertino, yes? At the De Anza College?
Yes, at the Future Summit, the first annual.
What is really amazing is how much work you've done with XR prior to coming to the CNC. But before we get there, could we kind of talk about your journey, where you started in teaching, your passion for technology, and then like how you ended up here?
Well, if you have 7 hours, I would love to go through all of it. But I know we don't have 7 hours, so I'll scale it back a little bit. I would love to share with you today. So really, how I came to this conversation is I started on my journey in social studies, high school education. I really had a passion for teaching and learning. My undergrad was in geography and social studies education from a state school in Minnesota, and just fell in love with how teaching and learning and technology go together through those first 3 years as a teacher. I'll date myself. That's when the iPad came out. And so when the iPad came out, that was really our first time experiencing a handheld device in teaching and learning. And so being a social studies educator, geography with maps, there's amazing things you can do with an iPad. And so I just fell in love with the impact that had, to the point where I moved to a district that was going one-to-one with iPads. And so my job was to integrate the iPads across an entire elementary school, which then eventually became a vision of an entire district. And so through that experience, I got to learn all sorts of different other curricular areas, not just social studies, because I was researching apps to use in a kindergarten class regarding science or letters or whatever the topic may be. It really went across the entire elementary school at that time. And I fell in love with how we could do things in such unique ways that really motivated students. And that was my hook, was just seeing the energy that students poured into new teaching and learning modalities. And so as we advanced technologies, that vision came to life. And so students just fell in love with learning again. And isn't that what we all want, is students to love learning? And that's really what kept me on this journey. And I haven't turned back. So I've been in ed tech related positions now for over a decade. And I just love everything it does for our students at the K-12 level and in higher education. And for that matter, really in any of our jobs that we do, not just in education, but in industry as well. Technology has advanced so quickly. And I really have tried to find the positives in that. Of course, we can go down a rabbit hole of a lot of negative aspects of that, but really focusing on the positive, because I feel like if we do that, that's our engagement factor. For me, I think anytime we can hook students into learning in a positive way, and technology is one way to do that if done correctly. That's the excitement I see, because then the faculty get on board. They're motivated about what has happened. If the faculty is motivated, they're going to motivate their students. If the students are motivated, they're going to graduate, become successful in life, so on and so forth. So that's just kind of the quick version of my journey. But I'd love to just dive a little deeper.
One of the things I remember we talked about was you were working with a refugee population. This was in Minnesota, yes?
Yes.
And this was with your iPads and being able to look at different reading levels and being able to understand a popular culture icon and to be able to all share in a piece of popular culture together. Could you kind of talk to us about that and how technology actually, you know how sometimes we think technology breaks us apart, but I think, how does it bring us together?
Great one. So that was at the middle school level. And so an app at the time, it was called Newsella. And Newsella did this thing where you could select the grade level reading. So you'd put in an article, whatever the article may be. And so I guess kind of early on AI, in that it would then take its intelligence and rewrite the article based on the grade level that you selected. And so one of those was I taught this careers, college, community, and citizenship course for middle schoolers. And so a lot of it was integrating technology, but a lot of it was about getting students interested in having conversations about what they want to do in their future, whether it be education, which they're all going to go on an educational journey. What does industry look like? What jobs are they interested in? What are they leaning towards? So starting that conversation earlier with students rather than waiting till they're in high school. And so the app that you're referring to, Newsella, I had students in my class that whether it was their first day in a United States classroom, for many of them, that was a reality, whether it was not knowing English as their primary language, so it was a second language to them. We could use this thing called Newsella in that I could put this article out about, say, Michael Jordan. And so we all know who Michael Jordan was, an NBA player, so on and so forth. But with Newsella, the exciting part was you could change the grade level understanding. So if I had students that I knew could accelerate through an article rather quickly, I would give them the 12th grade version of it. And this was middle school students. So they would have a little more depth. It would use bigger words. It would have more of the statistics behind Michael Jordan's career, who he played for, all of that kind of stuff. Or if it was a student's first time reading an English article, I could scale it to a kindergarten level, and it would make the reading a lot more easy for them. But then what that did as a class is we could have a joint conversation. So I could tee up the conversation for our students to make them comfortable. So really thinking about the belonging of students, tee up that conversation to say, who did we read an article about today? And any student in the class could raise their hand and say Michael Jordan. And I could tee them up to say, okay, who did Michael Jordan play for? The Chicago Bulls. And so we could go through these conversations, and everyone, all 35 students in that classroom could be a part of that conversation, which was really exciting to me because, again, the technology was allowing all students to participate. And so you'll hear me say multiple times, the belonging of students, the engagement of students. I feel like if a student is hooked into that learning, they're going to be that much more excited to be a part of what's going on. And then, of course, my end goal is I hope they retain that information and they carry that on through their teaching and learning in the future. So something as simple as that. And I mean, I could give you 50 examples similar to that, but that just really opened up my horizons for what this technology can do in the classroom. And seeing the joy that this would bring faculty to then bring to students, I just get so excited about that.
I just thought of something you said in a prior conversation about transferability. Is that something you think that once the students have access to this technology, they use it one time, right? Do you think that the students then would be too dependent on this technology, or do you think it becomes a transferable skill?
I think it really becomes that transferable skill. And so the more and more we can have students see some sort of technology, whatever it may be in whatever setting it's in, but then they see a way to apply that in another setting. And who is the best person to model that behavior? The faculty member, right? So the faculty member can model that behavior in whatever the subject area is, but then they see overlap. And for a student, I think that then allows them to dive deeper into the subject because they're spending less time learning, say, maybe about 50 different tools, and they can focus on those couple tools that they know. And so I think that's important as well to highlight, is to have a mutual conversation amongst faculty. So then we aren't spreading our students so thin, because just think of a student journey when they need to log into 5 courses and the syllabi are all designed differently. And the students are just trying to level set to just figure out, okay, when is the office hour of this instructor, or how do I contact the instructor? If that's posted in 5 different ways, now the student has to learn in 5 different ways, which isn't always bad. But if there's some overlap there, that's where that transferability of that knowledge takes place. And it helps the student journey tremendously. And it also helps the faculty, because now they're not spending time trying to explain some of the easier tasks of just the course design in general, because there is a standardization to it. So if you look at it from that lens, it can really be positive for both the student and the faculty. And then hopefully, again, with that transferability of that knowledge, they can take that to more and more subjects and hold on to those skills because now they have that in their repertoire.
It's almost like the technology itself is a push, and you don't really just need to rely. It's not a crutch then, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and you really have to overcome that as being the biggest barrier, because it starts off as a barrier. But if you can do some level setting with that student to get that technology launched, once that happens, then they're able to utilize those skills in so many other areas.
And what you said really was interesting about that transferability. You touched briefly on the C4 program about how at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade levels, you started students to learn about the high schools, what that looks like. It's just a different beast than when we were in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Can you kind of tell us about that program, just because it's so innovative?
Yeah, so when I was part of that school district, they started this new program, or they're thinking of starting this new program called C4, Careers College Community Citizenship. And so what that was supposed to do is to start students having conversations in 6th grade about what their high school future might look like. Because once we wait till 9th grade to start some conversations about what your careers look like, by then they've already registered for at least their freshman classes in 9th grade, if not maybe already 10th grade, depending on how that school schedules. And that's different across the United States. We see that in different examples all over. And so this program was really supposed to help all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders scaffold in different areas of their learning, the learning journey, to really help them when they get to the high school level. So let's talk about what our college is. What's a 2-year college? What's a university? What is a department? What is just any aspect of kind of the higher education system? Those were conversations we were starting to have in 6th grade. In 7th grade, we were starting to do some career inventories. So what are you interested in? What do you want to do? And then by the time they got to 8th grade, then we would dive a little bit deeper and really pair all of that together. And this was just an elective. It was designed to be about 6 weeks long over the course of that grade level. So by the time they finished 8th grade, they had 18 weeks of this C4 class. And of course, the curriculum was different for each grade level. But when they got to 8th grade, then we started putting all of this together to map out, okay, what do you need to do in high school to then get to college or get to industry based on your interest? And of course, those can always change, but at least if we start having those conversations earlier, our students have a better chance at success, because then all of a sudden 2 years go by and they realize, oh shoot, if I would have taken that course 2 years ago, I could be doing this instead. And so it really teed up students for success, because they were able to have some of these introductory conversations a lot earlier. So it was a very innovative program in the state of Minnesota, especially for that district. And the goal of that, again, was just to help our students succeed.
Out of curiosity, if you can kind of go back to that mentally, what do you think people can do 6th, 7th, 8th grade with AI and XR? What do you think they could do differently?
Goodness. So we can kind of break those apart. With AI, I think some of the really exciting things we can do at the middle school level is now you can have those one-on-one conversations with those students as the educator without having the one-on-one conversation. And I don't want to say the one-on-one conversation isn't important, but when you have 250 students coming through your door every single day, you don't have enough hours in the day to make yourself available to all 250. And so with augmenting that with something like artificial intelligence, now I can possibly set up an AI tutor bot that the student's able to interact with, that I can have that same conversation, but I can repeat it over and over again with multiple students within the same day. Because of course, it's always the introductory conversation. So what would that look like? So hi, Norma, how are you today? It's so nice that you're in class. So nice to have you here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what you're interested in for your future. And so from there, the script is always pretty much the same for the introductory conversation. But then as the educator, now I can look at all that data on the back end and say, wow, I have these 5 students who all want to go into video production for a career. And so now I can tailor that assignment tomorrow to do something with these 5 in video production and pair them together. Whereas I didn't have time to meet with all 5 of them. I only had time to initiate a chat bot with them. But now, based on their responses, I'm able to tailor the conversation. And so I think AI has gotten a bad rap in education, in that people say, well, it's just going to overtake all teachers and faculty positions. I'm one that I don't believe that. I believe it's actually a really positive benefit for faculty and teachers to be able to embrace it, because then there's different ways you can do the teaching and learning process. And the example I just gave is one way. Extended reality is kind of the same conversation. Now we can just engage our students at a different level because we can bring them to different places. I know many people in the United States have done the 8th grade visit to Washington, D.C. And I use that example because it's pretty universal. A lot of people have experienced that. Or if you didn't, at least you've heard about others who have. And so with that, the coordination that it goes to take an entire class of 8th graders across the country, or even if you live near Washington, D.C., to Washington, D.C., is a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous cost as well. And so if we think through how can we do this differently, I will never say extended realities should replace the actual reality, because I do think there's huge value standing in front of the Lincoln Monument. The power and gravity that brings you to it is amazing. However, what if I can do a whole bunch of legwork ahead of time before we even get to Washington, D.C., to think through what you're going to see there, and who was this Abraham Lincoln character, and what do I even care about him? But now I know all of this information. So when I stand in front of that monument, I'm not like, oh, there's another big statue. Cool. Now the impact can all of a sudden hit you as that 8th grader, because you're like, wow, that's actually amazing. I know who that is. And I know what this means to be here in the presence of this statue. And so I think through extended reality, we're able to bring a lot of those experiences to students, which is amazing because you cut down on those costs, those initial costs of bringing that whole field trip across the country. And then you can run through it for a few years and building content around that. It's just amazing at what you can do for your students to give them a taste of what that might be like. But again, I don't want to replace the in-person experience, of course. As a social studies educator, I promote all travel. I love when people travel around the world, and I love to hear about their travels around the world. But at the same time, if I can bring that many more people to whatever the place may be. Currently, I live in the Central Valley of California. The gates of Yosemite are an hour and a half from my house. But there are so many people I talk to in our community who have never gone that hour and a half to the gates of Yosemite, whether it just be cost or coordination of the activity. But if I have them in my 6th grade, 7th grade, 12th grade, you can scaffold it for different audiences. If I have them in my classroom and I have access to 1, 2, 5, a classroom set of some sort of headset, which in my time teaching and learning, it was the iPad. We looked through the iPad. It wasn't as engaging, but these technologies continue to advance so quickly that now all of a sudden I can bring my whole class to the gates of Yosemite in something that otherwise they never would have experienced face to face. And so I think that's the tremendous value that this brings. And it's not just about current places. We can now time travel. So if I want to bring my classroom to the 1600s for whatever reason, I can do that. If I want my students to see the front line of a battle and to feel that, I know in my era of learning, that's when the movie Saving Private Ryan came out. And that was kind of that firsthand experience of, oh my goodness, what this actually means, which was very impactful. And so I think that's tremendous value to that. And so the more we can bring those type of opportunities to our students, the better. And I don't want to say better in terms of it was a lot of fun watching Saving Private Ryan, because it wasn't. War is not a fun thing. However, that was the only avenue that I had to experience such an impactful event in the history of the world. So events like that, you can bring students to time travel to these places where they can see the gravity of what that event really was, to really fully immerse your senses into it, which I think then is so impactful for teaching and learning, because that student is going to hold on to that memory for a lot longer than if I just would have had that one PowerPoint slide up on the overhead that said, hey, this battle took place between these dates and these dates. You're going to need to know that for the rest of your life. And now we're moving on to the next subject. That just doesn't have the same awe factor to make it stick in your memory compared to that fully immersive experience, whether it be through some sort of extended reality, whether it's a movie, whether it's a virtual reality headset. There's so many ways to do that. Augmenting it through your phone, so augmented reality. There's so many great ways we can engage students unlike ever before.
You brought up a couple really important points, because I remember Saving Private Ryan. I remember watching it with my hands over my eyes, and somehow I had my hands over my ear. I was kind of like, see no evil, hear no evil at the same time, because it was so scary, right? It was impactful, and for me, it was traumatic. So finally understanding what that was like and getting the visual, and again, from the safety of a television set. What I really like about what you said is now with XR, we don't really need to depend on Hollywood media to bring those experiences to us.
Absolutely. I think a part of that is just the storytelling that Hollywood brings to us is the way that we then bring in that information into our knowledge base. And so Hollywood does an amazing job giving us that narrative and driving that story. But now we're extending that to even more opportunities coming up, which I think is really exciting for students, because there's not an instructor in the world that I've ever met that says, I wish my students were less engaged. They're too engaged. They're too engaged in their learning. They're just too excited to come to my class every day. I've never heard an instructor say, like, if we could tamp that down a little bit, that would be excellent, because they're way too excited. Every instructor wants their students to be more engaged and more excited, no matter what level they're at, because that's what learning should be. Learning truly is about engagement and about immersing yourself into that experience, whatever that experience may be. So the more and more we can do that for our students through whatever tool we have available to us, we'd be silly not to. And that's what I get excited about, is helping other faculty see that vision and then seeing it impact their students in such a positive way. It's really exciting.
You touched upon the theme of positivity twice, or multiple times. And what is amazing is the way you are considering technology and advances in technology. Education doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? We are preparing students for their lives. The word in Chinese for students is teaching students to live their lives, right? To prepare them to learn for their lives. And how do you think that positivity, the way you understand technology, because it's not a blind, everything is fine, everything is great type of positivity. How do you use that positivity to adapt to the latest technologies for, or not even the latest, but for what's happening around us? And how do you think that serves our students?
Great questions. So when I use positivity in this conversation, I think the important thing that I'm trying to portray is that we can get people involved in a new way of doing something. That's innovation, right? Taking the current problem, whatever it may be, and modifying it with something else to become something better than ever before. So we're not necessarily redefining everything, but we are trying to make tweaks. And if it doesn't have a positive impact, whether it's for students or for the instructor, is this the best way to do it? Or is there a different way to do this? So if we're trying to integrate a new technology, for example, so I'll give a little story on the first time I integrated Google Docs with sharing for peer-reviewed information. So I had an instructor who said, I don't want to use the technology. There's nothing wrong with my current method of just printing the papers. I bring all 300 home. I spend all weekend going through them. I come back to class. I hand them back to the student. The student goes and makes those edits on the document. They reprint it. They hand it to a peer. The peer makes their peer-reviewed marks. They pass it back, make the edits. They reprint their final draft and turn it into me. So from an environmental standpoint, I was like, wow, that's a lot of paper. But then really, is this the best use of time for everybody? And so I said, with this new thing called Google Docs, and Google was just the platform we were using. Of course, there's many document sharing avenues that you can use. But I said, well, let's try it this way. Let's do a little pilot of this and see if it works. And so let's trade out, instead of doing all the paper printing, let's get on a shared doc. You'll have access to it. The student will have access to it. So on that first iteration, you're going to do this thing called suggesting mode. So you're not going to edit the document, because that was a fear of them, that I was, as the teacher, I'm going to just edit for them and now they don't have to learn what the mistake was. No, we use this thing called suggesting mode. And so it takes away all of that. So you're able to edit it, they can accept it, or decline that change, whatever it may be, or just show them the one example in the first paragraph where they're using the wrong use of a word and they carried that through the entire document. Just show them once. You don't need to show them 50 times, but tell them there's 50 more instances of this throughout this entire document. And so that faculty member tried that, and about a week later came back to me and said, I don't know why I didn't use this sooner. And I said, well, part of it was because you couldn't, because document sharing like this wasn't as easy 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it may be. But seeing that faculty member light up in the excitement and joy of how just the peer review process could be so much cleaner and easier and engaging, because then all of a sudden when the teacher or that peer review partner makes a suggestion, the student can change it in real time, instantly, whether they're sitting next to each other or across the world from each other. They can make those edits happen. They don't have to wait to reprint the paper, hand it back. So when I talk about positivity through educational technology, that's a perfect example of it. It was a positive outcome for both the student and for the faculty member. And sometimes it isn't positive on both ends. Sometimes it is. And if it isn't, there's a cost analysis that needs to take place to say, is this what is best for the student? Even though the student might not love doing it this way, is this still better? Is this more impactful for their career journey or education journey as a whole? And I think that's what we have to look at, is what is the impact that this is having on the teaching and learning process, and who is it helping? And are we doing something that's going to benefit the student? Because, I mean, I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but how many jobs are our students who are in our K-12 system right now, those jobs that haven't even been created yet? And I remember when I was teaching that middle school C4 class, it was something like 50% of the jobs that those middle schoolers would have weren't even created yet. And I mean, now being that was 10 years ago, that holds true to today, in that I see some of these jobs that have come about in the past 10 years. I'm like, well, that there's one of them. That didn't exist. Oh, that job didn't exist. And it's really exciting to see that kind of play out now. And that number continues, because now knowledge and information is being accelerated at such a high rate that we really have to think, what is the impact of this, positive or negative? And then how does that play out? And do we want to integrate whatever this may be? And that's the exciting part for me, is you really have to analyze every piece of it. And sometimes you come out ahead and sometimes you don't. And you hope to cut ties with whatever the negative impacts would be sooner than later. But to truly innovate on whatever we're doing, especially with teaching and learning, we have to analyze all parts of it and pull out all of those positive pieces.
That's amazing, because what we're doing is what you're talking about, collaborating on Google Docs. It's something we take for granted now. We create a shared doc, we all work on it together, we save a lot of time. And I really think it's hyper important to have that skill for students, because it's something they're going to need in every workplace. It's assumed that you know how to share a doc. It's assumed that you know how to collaborate before you even walk into the door on day one. And I could see that impact of that positivity in the understanding that this is something that can be useful, instead of saying, this is all great, we just love technology for technology's sake.
Yeah, I really have a fear when we adopt things just for the sake of adopting things because the neighboring district did it, or the latest journal article said, if you want to be X institution, you need to adopt Y technology, whatever it may be, because then it doesn't have a true foothold in the initial value added of what we were trying to accomplish. So there really needs to be a backbone to what is this trying to solve? And if there isn't a problem there, what is this enhancing? And so we really have to critically think through that in these decisions, because a lot of times these decisions also come with a lot of money behind them. So we have to make sure we're making wise decisions fiscally, because we do have limited resources. And so we have to figure out what is the best bang for our buck in terms of what we're going to integrate into our system. And some platforms don't integrate well. And so we don't want to create the system that isn't going to work well. The other one we don't want to necessarily always dive into right away is a technology that maybe hasn't been tried and tested yet. And so pilot groups work great for that if it's a new technology. But if we know a vendor has been working in this space for 10 years with great success, perfect example of it, Khan Academy. Khan Academy started as some YouTube videos. It was just a standalone product within YouTube. It wasn't even a company at that point. And so to adopt that as your math curriculum at that time would have been a huge gamble. But for some, it would have paid off because then Khan Academy blew up to be the Khan Academy that we know today. But that's one today where I would recommend if you're looking at math curriculum, that'd be a good one to look at. You know they've been around, you know how they've grown, and you know they're going to be here tomorrow because of what they've done. And so when we talk about faculty training, that's important because you don't want to do all of this additional legwork and training for faculty for something, a tool that is probably going to go away by next semester. There's nothing a faculty dislikes more than putting in hours of redoing their curriculum just to find out we're not going to use that vendor anymore. So picking out those vendors that you know are going to be around, such as a Khan Academy, really makes a lot of sense because then you get that bang for your buck.
That sense of being careful, we are spending public money, that we want to be very careful with it, and that we are going for bang for the buck, we're going for transferability, and that ultimately what we're creating at the end of the day is student engagement and supporting our students for their success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the more we can support our students and make them realize how fun learning actually is so authentically enjoyable to really see that. And I think that's what excites me. I know it's a podcast, so you can't see my smile, but you might be able to hear my smile on this topic. And that I just think it's amazing at what we can do when you see that light bulb moment click and that motivation just goes through the roof. And tomorrow they come back to class and they've researched 300 other avenues of that conversation that you had because they're genuinely interested. And not once did they ask from that point forward, how many points is this worth? Is there an extra credit opportunity for this? Because they realize the value added to their learning experience that they're having is everything that they're asking for. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, you got 50 out of 50 on that. They're like, oh, that was graded? I didn't even know. Doesn't matter to me because I loved doing it. And that's what we want in all topics, if possible. And of course, we're humans, so we don't love every assignment that we do. I wish that was possible, but it isn't. And so for those ones that we don't love, we have to be able to figure out ways to make them just a little bit more engaging, a little better for the student outcome, a little more easy on the faculty side in terms of whether it be grading that assignment or giving feedback on that assignment. So all of that comes together. And it's not necessarily the easiest task in the world, but that's the hard work that we do day in and day out is to figure out what can be best for students and for faculty.
You just started the position at the California Virtual Campus, yes?
I did, yes. I'm about 2 months in at this point, so I'm still learning all these new things as well.
I literally just moved back to California 2 years ago. And would you mind just explaining to the rookie, the newbie, how the CVC and the CCC's California Community Colleges, because this is rather a unique system. When I was not in the state, would you kind of give us a primer on that?
I would love to. So the California Community College system is the largest higher education system in the country. 2.1 million students, 60,000 faculty. It's just massive. And that's what's so exciting about it is the impact that we have on teaching and learning. It's very true that a lot of states or consortiums follow what the California Community College system does because we have such a large reach for an audience. And so really, if you're able to find your way into the California Community College system, it's really an amazing opportunity because of the size that we have and the amount of area that we expand upon. I mean, think about it's about 14 hours, 15 hours, depending how you drive from one end of California to the other. And we always joke when we're driving around, my wife and I, in that there's different pockets of this state that really fit into other states. So if you're in the Central Valley, you're really driving through the Iowa of California. If you go up to the foothills of the Sierras, you're driving through parts of Colorado. And so you can identify other parts of the United States all over California. And that's just my geography background coming through. But really with the California Community College system, the California Virtual Campus is an aspect of the California Community College system. We are a grant provided by the CCC. And so our main focus, we have kind of two sides of the house. One is the exchange, which allows students to take courses at other institutions within our system. So for example, if you're trying to take that Psychology 1A class at your home institution, but all of the seats are filled, you registered late, there's nothing available, you can hop on the exchange, and there's probably around the state an online offering of that course. And so it's really designed to be a student-centered opportunity, so our students can get the courses they need to get them to their next level, whatever that may be, whether it's industry or a higher education institution, one of our state CSUs or the University of California system. That's really the goal of it. And the other side of it is the @ONE, so the online network of educators. And that is the system designed to be the professional development avenue for our entire system. And so our scope is really providing trainings. A lot of it is around educational technology, but a lot of it is around teaching and learning as a system. So how do we help faculty within our system develop the skills necessary to be able to support their students? Because something unique about higher education a lot of times is typically you're a subject matter expert, and so you know your subject very well, but you might not be from a K-12 background. In really, at that level, you focus on teaching and learning aspects. So you learn how to become a good teacher. You learn how to do group discussions in a class. You learn when the class isn't going right with this method, how to pivot. And so our role is really more on that side of things, teaching and learning, less on the subject matter expertise, because our faculty bring that subject matter expertise every day. And so we want to be able to support them on the teaching and learning side of things, so they feel comfortable in the classroom. They know how to engage students, how to motivate students, how to design an assignment. What does an assignment even mean? So some people, we might take it for granted, how to build a course, how to make assign points to assignments. And so that's really our job, is to help all faculty with that growth opportunity.
I remember I was lucky enough in my master's and PhD programs to have the teaching classes at both places. And I remember some of my colleagues were pretty much handed a textbook for day one and said, go teach, without that background. And it is amazing that the California Community Colleges through the CVC is really focusing on supporting teachers in order to reach student success.
Yeah.
Is that the mindset that you have coming into your role?
I would say absolutely, yes. And in my past roles, this is exactly what I've done, is how do I have those light bulb moments for those faculty, whether it's introducing something like a Google Doc, and that's just, for that faculty, the number one tool that they're going to use for the next 5 to 10 years. To see that light bulb moment happen is so exciting for me, and that's really the energy that I bring to this position, is how do I support faculty. And it's not just faculty, it's our staff that take the courses as well. It's our administrators that take the trainings. But I would say the bulk of the attendees or participants are our faculty. And so how do I bring these types of concepts to our faculty to support them on their journey?
With that in mind, we talked about belonging in a past conversation, how it is important for students to belong to their classrooms, their learning environments. What about teachers?
That's a great question. And I'm with you 100% that I know we have talked about this before. Anytime you can make students feel welcome into that classroom environment, no matter what tool you're trying to use to engage them, no matter what technique you're trying to use in your teaching and learning, is of tremendous value. And the same goes for our faculty. I've had the privilege in a few of my past roles of being the person who onboards our faculty to the institution. And the thing I love about that is I can kind of blend some of the the pedagogy side of things with some of their content and really help them fill the gaps that they need to fill, whether that be in their online course or their face-to-face course, and create that sense that you have support. We are here to support you. And from that, they recognize that there is people that to lean on that can support them in areas that they're not great at. And they get better and better at it, but not all of us come day one ready to go with every single tactic necessary to have all of our students earn A's in the course content, whatever it may be. We wish that was possible, but none of us have the capacity to be able to carry that burden all the time with us. And so I think the more we can make sure our faculty feel like they're involved in the conversation, they belong in that conversation, that has a trickle-down effect to our students. And it's the exact same thing with learning, right? The faculty has all of that knowledge. They're the subject matter expert. Where are they trying to send that knowledge? To their students. That's why they're in the classroom. And so the same thing goes with them feeling accepted in the institution. If they feel accepted into that institution, they're going to have a more authentic journey in terms of being able to support their students, which is ultimately our goal.
And being that I just moved back to the state, it is amazing because, again, we're such a huge system, right? One end of California to the other, 14, 15 hours. I think where I was born, Taiwan is not, could probably fit, I don't even know how many Taiwans in the state of California. And it's amazing that even though we're such a huge state, I feel that I belong to a larger system. I am not just teaching at one school, not just teaching at one class. There's this group of support and that wraparound support that we want to provide to our students. I feel that as a faculty member. And that is so amazing that we're able to do this, or that y'all are able to do this for such a huge state, such a huge entity.
Yeah, something unique that I want to touch on there is think about when you have a system that has 116 unique colleges in it, which is our system, you have a lot of departments that have a one-person department, right? So there's that one psychology faculty at that one institution in Northern California, and they don't have a colleague to bounce those ideas off of. So how do we develop communities of practice around our state to really give support and belongingness to all of our faculty? And I think that's a tremendous ability that we have at the CBC, especially on the professional development side, is we are able to drive some of those conversations to create those pathways forward so all faculty feel like they have a network. And our job is to really facilitate those and to bring people together into those conversations. Something that excites me about the portfolio of CBC courses that we offer is if a faculty takes that training, they're taking it with other peers within the California Community College system. So then instantly they now have a new network of people that they can rely on for whatever information it might be. And it might be a simple question of, hey, I've been using this textbook for 5 years and it's driving me insane and I would love to switch to a different one, or I would love to look into zero textbook costs for my students or open educational resources for my students, but I don't know anyone else in the field using a resource. Is there even one available? And you then have a network to rely on, and that person knows somebody. What did it used to be? 6 degrees of separation. And I think that number has gotten smaller and smaller as technology has evolved and our social networks have become even larger. But our job is to facilitate some of those conversations, to connect these pieces around the state so our faculty feel like they're supported in their teaching and learning journey.
I love this in the sense that we're talking about using technology to bring people closer, right? It's not that barrier, but instead it is a positive tool that we can actually, that we can actually work together on, and it builds these networks that span the state. And I'm in Southern California. You're much further north, and I think we've met maybe a sum total of one time. But I know that if I have questions about XR, understanding CBC, you are now a contact because we met. Yeah. And this is such a valuable thing that the CBC does provide.
Yeah, it's so fun because I have these conversations daily with different faculty around the state. And then once we see each other 2 years from now at a conference, you're like, oh, you're outside of your little Zoom box. Like all of a sudden, you're a full human. There you are. I see you in person. And it's so exciting because it's just like catching up with old friends when you see each other in person, because you have that network. where previously we didn't have that ability to be able to have these types of conversations from anywhere in the world, and be able to provide it to larger audiences and hope it sticks and it's meaningful and it supports them. And so it's really fun to be able to have these types of conversations to support our system as a whole, and to create some of these networks for all of us to benefit, because really that's the goal. Is we're just trying to basically be a good neighbor. And this is our avenue to be able to do that now with modern technology.
With that in mind, is technology, CVC, your new role, where do you think AI, I know it's existed it didn't really hit us in the general public until a year and a half, 2 years ago. And with XR, right, we kind of had it in the past with, our Xboxes, and there was that Shark Cage game, and of course the zombie games, but now they're kind of combining. Where do you think we are now with our current use of technology in your role in the CVC? And where do you think we're going to get to maybe 5 years out?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So a lot of our scope of work is providing that professional development statewide. Therefore, we have to be knowledgeable about these technologies. And so whether it's our fall webinar series, I think we had about 800 participants in those learning about new AI aspects. We had great presenters on that. In the spring of 25, we'll have some additional webinar series available focusing on AI, and really we need to understand it to then be able to help others understand it. And so we put in a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure we know what's happening in these spaces. And AI is really impacting so much of what we do, which is so exciting to me. I don't remember such a large revolution around a technology since the internet itself, I would say. And so I've lived through a lot of these different technologies, but really this is the first time we've had some of these larger conversations. Cell phone integration was obviously up there as well. When cell phones became on everyone all the time, how do we utilize that to the betterment of everything? But AI has so many advantages into what it can do, whether it be a peer tutor, it can review a document, you can ask it questions to brainstorm different things. So here's what I'm thinking. Am I thinking right on this or wrong on this, good or bad? You can have these conversations that previously you would have had to call a colleague and have some of those conversations, or putting all of your information in there in terms of your scope of work that you're working on. And hey, are there any flaws that you see in this document? Does this not align with the scope of work that we're intended to do? And I say that from any platform. If you're a faculty member and you're looking at your CORs, your course outline of record, and you're trying to figure out, does this lesson fit somewhere into this course? Because I love teaching about this, and AI can instantly analyze your entire course shell and say, yeah, it fits perfectly, and here's where it fits. But I would also add X, Y, and Z. So there's so many applicable areas for AI to expand. And with extended reality is the same conversation. So there's technologies that exist where we can have so many new aspects within our coursework and now combine them. And that's where I think we're going, is think about, as a past K-12 educator, think about becoming a teacher. You did a lot of observation hours in the classroom, and there were some scenarios that didn't come up in the classroom trainings that you did in your undergrad classes. And for some people that they took master's or PhD level courses, like you said, for teaching and learning. But there's some scenarios that don't always come up in those trainings. And so therefore, extended realities have this opportunity to bring more scenarios to life in a really short amount of time, because now I don't have to wait till those 30 students are in the classroom in front of me in that 7th grade classroom, and I'm trying to teach whatever the topic may be, and I realize they're more interested in throwing paper airplanes across the classroom. How do I flip this script? How do I engage them? What do I need to do differently? Well, through extended realities, we can replicate some of those and have people repeat those activities over and over again. So when it happens in real life, they fully understand, oh, I've experienced this 15 times already. So they can experience some things that we haven't experienced before. Combine that with AI. Now as a teacher, I can be in front of the classroom. All of the students can be pre-programmed as AI avatars. And there could be a scenario that plays out where one student is really aggressive towards another student, and me as the faculty member, I have the ability to accelerate that conversation in a negative way or twist it back to being a positive aspect. But with AI, I don't need to rely on the actual classroom setting to have that carry out. Of course, I will say that's probably the best place to have it, but I can run through some of these scenarios ahead of time. And we see this in industry all the time, whether it be driving simulators, flight simulators. You can map all of these kind of things out to say, oh, I have experienced this. Maybe it wasn't in real life, but that's okay because it's still experience. And so now all those AI generated student avatars can give me feedback on my teaching and learning, and I can try some different tactics with them to see what plays out. And it feels real because it's in an extended reality environment. And so I think over the next 5 years, we're going to have some amazing advances in this type of technology. And of course, extended reality has existed. It's great. But really kind of like the video game avenue is that the script is kind of written. There's not a lot of deviation from the original script. And with AI, I think that deviation is going to be able to happen more and more. And I think we need to lean into that because this stat, I can't cite the source off the top of my head, but for every dollar made in the movie industry right now, it's like $7 or $8 that are made in the video game industry. 85% of incoming freshmen this past year into higher education play video games. And so this is where our students are. And so I think it's our job to embrace that and to integrate that in any way possible. And so colleges, universities that are looking at implementing extended realities, no matter what the company is, I think there is huge value to that because that's what our students are already trying to find, are those types of spaces to come together.
We talked a lot about extended reality. People know about VR, AR, the Pokemon games. Remember Pokemon Go? Would you mind explaining a little bit about the way you understand extended reality?
So extended reality is really just kind of the umbrella of everything you just mentioned. So augmented reality, I remember when we were getting a new hot tub in our backyard, we didn't know what color to pick out. And sure enough, you can pull up your phone and you can augment by dropping that color hot tub right in the backyard where it's going to be situated and say, I don't like that color, switch it to this one. And we could even do a screenshot from our phone. And then when we compared it to when we actually picked a color and installed the hot tub, it was amazing at how real it looked. But we were able to visualize that before making that large of a purchase to go into our backyard. So that's kind of that augmented version. And that's just one piece of furniture, a hot tub. You could do it with any furniture. I know like Home Depot, Lowe's even has paint colors. So you can change the room to a different color. Oh, I don't like it. But you're looking through your phone. So you're really augmenting what's currently happening in the real world. And then on the virtual reality side of it, that's where you're fully immersed into an experience. Put on that headset and you're really looking around in some place entirely different, which is absolutely amazing. And then there's some areas where it's mixed between those two. So you have some headsets, or within that headset, you're able to flip it to the actual reality that you're seeing through. And there's some overlays of some different technologies. So really you're able to kind of blur the lines between fully animated, whatever it may be, with your actual reality that you're looking at. And there's a lot of different applications for that. Look at some new technologies like the Meta glasses that recently were launched a few months ago. Think about the map overlays as you're biking down the street, and in those headsets, in those glasses, there's kind of a heads-up display that shows that arrow to take a left here. So you're not looking down at your phone wondering, is this the street where I take a left at? Right in the glasses, in the lens itself, it can point the arrow, oh, you're taking a left here. And you can have voiceovers to that kind of stuff. So there's so many applications to it. And really we're, I would say, a few years into this journey, but imagine that technology 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's going to continue to evolve just like any technology that we've experienced. So again, partnering those realities with AI, it has tremendous opportunities for growth in a whole bunch of different fields.
One of the things I want to really, really talk about, because every time we have a new technology, we need to be concerned with, is it accessible? Is it usable? Is it going to create an unnecessary barrier? And we talked about this about universal design. How do you think AI, XR, extended reality, how do you think we can be better prepared as teachers to design in ways that are accessible in UX, right? Applying UX principles to these two areas.
Well said. And I think really when we talk about universal design, for those that don't have a background in universal design, really something that I love about universal design is creating a system where everyone is included. And so if you design for the hardest situation, so I'm going to give an easy example of that. So the family wants to go to the major sporting event, you name whatever it is. So we're going to go to that major NFL football game. And so we have to travel 45 minutes to get there. And you pull up your phone, and in Google, you can do the walk, you can do the car, the bike, the bus. You can select which one it is. Some of them are way easier than others, and it gives you the time right there. So if you take the bike, it's going to take you a lot longer than taking the car, because obviously you're most likely going to bike slower than how fast your car can go. And so you're designing, though, from the lens of anyone is able to be a part of this. I'm not designing for Lance Armstrong, who is a really fast biker. Like, that doesn't correspond to the vast majority of people. I'm not designing this for Jeff Gordon, who's a really fast car driver. I'm designing it for everyone. So most likely, could Jeff Gordon get there faster? Possibly. Could Lance Armstrong get there faster? Sure. But I'm trying to include everyone and think of every possibility that's going to impact this commute, whatever it may be. And when I say everyone, I'm talking about someone who is wheelchair bound. So how does the wheelchair get onto the bus or into the car? Or does the wheelchair option show for someone for the bicycle option? So thinking through all of those scenarios behind the scenes, so it's universally designed to make sense. So no matter who pulls it up, it's applicable to them and their situation. So when we think about these new technologies, how do we design to make sure everyone is included from the front end? It is tremendously valuable, because the use then becomes a global reach. It's not limited to, people who make more than $500,000 a year, or it's not limited to anyone who is K through 6. So if you think about an amusement park as a prime example, so you need to be this tall to get on the ride. Well, if you make an amusement park where the barrier to get on every ride is 5 feet tall, now you're excluding a whole bunch of people who are not 5 feet tall. And if it's an amusement park and your target audience is children, and you're going above 5 feet tall, well, now you've eliminated a lot of kids that would like to go to the amusement park. So now you have to think about, how am I going to create these rides at the amusement park to tailor them so it is safe for everyone to use, even if you're under 5 feet tall. The conversation can be obtained for anyone who is targeting. And so with these new technologies, now we can cross things like language, I think is amazing. I remember, I think it was about 2009 was the first time I used kind of a Google translation feature, 2010, where you could hold your phone up and it would translate what it's seeing through the camera. And that was augmenting the reality. And it was so cool, because if you're traveling worldwide and you hold that phone up and you're in the middle of Tokyo, now I can read all of that in English, because I don't speak Japanese and I definitely can't read Japanese. But now I can see that, that's where I'm trying to go. That's the restaurant that I'm trying to get to. And so through these technologies, combined with universal design, we have tremendous opportunity, if we decide to take that opportunity right now, to design for everyone included. And I think more than any time in history, this is probably the greatest opportunity to be inclusive compared to other times, because the technologies have allowed us to be more inclusive than ever before, if we do a good job on the onset to make sure we're creating that inclusive environment.
In my case, growing up in Taiwan's educational system meant that I had a big learning curve when it came to teaching. When I started teaching, it was a very steep learning curve to figure out that not everyone learned the way I did. Some people needed more time. Others responded better to hands-on activities, and I had to adapt my approach again and again and again. It took me years to get comfortable making these adjustments for a variety of learning styles for students. Now I'm wondering, has AI evolved enough to help us address these different learning needs?
I absolutely think it is. And I say that from the standpoint of if you give it the right prompt, it can give you an opportunity on the other end. And so something like, if I could read this article, but rather than have it talk about Romeo and Juliet, is there a more modern day application that I relate to better? And so I can tell AI, I'm a huge college football fan, and I actually am. I love college football. So is there a Romeo versus Juliet story in college football? Or, in sports, a lot of times, the David versus Goliath. Is there a different way you can word this versus any other, me having to read the old text? Modernize this for me. And that's just one example. And so then AI can do that in a very meaningful way, because AI then instantly says, okay, the David in this story is team X, the Goliath is team Y, and here's the storyline, here's the narrative, here's why they've identified as X versus Y, and here's how that plays out. Their percentage to win this game is 0.02%, but there's a chance that they could win it, and it's 0.02%. If they were going to win it, here's how they would win it. So if Romeo and Juliet's story is a happy ending, here's how it would have to play out to be that happy ending. And so technologies give us that opportunity to create a better learning journey for our students to relate in different ways. Good or bad, we're able to have those stories told in a different way. Now, that isn't always appropriate to change that learning journey or that story or that narrative. But in certain aspects, it absolutely is, because now as a student, then 20 minutes later, I can flip it back to, now I fully understand what Romeo and Juliet was about. And I never could figure out why they just couldn't get married and live happily ever after. I didn't know that was the whole backstory behind this. And so through AI, it adapted it to a story that I fully understood. And the cool part about that for a faculty member is it can do that for 200 different students in your class. And so now the students come back to class the next day, whether this is in an online setting or a face-to-face setting, they come back, and now again, we can have that mutual conversation, because now everyone knows what Romeo and Juliet is about, but they all had different backstories through AI, whether it was a college football journey, whether it was a pop culture reference, a TV show that people are watching, a TikTok video that everyone has seen, whatever it may be, we can bring that conversation back to Romeo and Juliet in a meaningful way.
I like that, in the sense that we're not caught up in the these, the thous, and the thines, right, with Shakespeare, and only having, do you remember the Cliff Notes?
Yes.
Only having that as a resource, but being able to, as a learner, use that original text, do something different with it that empowers my learning, that is customized to me, and that I can still come back to that text. And
yeah.
And I know for me that once I watch a movie, there's a really good chance I'm going to go read the book, right? I'm going to probably go play with I'm probably going to buy a toy from that, right? So the idea is that we fully immerse in something. We are better engaged with something than if we just had the original text and said, there you go, the end.
Yeah, I remember one of my first teaching activities, which I was trained on and I learned through doing, was reading the Constitution. And so word for word, read this, understand it, know what it means. So you read it the first time through and you're like, this doesn't make really any sense. Is this English? I don't even understand these words that I'm reading. Oh, it is English. Okay, got it. But it's just written from a different era of how we would even write English. So I got to think through that aspect and then think, okay, is this first person? Who's the plural in this? Like, I don't understand all of these aspects. And so through technology, we're able to modify that to then give us different versions of how that plays out. So give me a real world example of the First Amendment. And instantly it can give you a real example of what that is. Okay, give me 50 articles, pros and cons of the First Amendment. Boom, there they are. And so rather than me having to spend days, weeks, months trying to find those 50 articles, I have them in about 7 seconds maximum. And that's because maybe I have slow internet. But you can get so much content so quickly. And then have it synthesize that content, which is an amazing aspect of it. And so now I'm more motivated and engaged because I have it at my fingertips in words that I understand, in a example that I completely understand. And so now when tomorrow I go back to class and the instructor says, okay, tell me what that means, I'm able to recite it in those words, but then also give some real applicable examples of it that are meaningful to me. And so to me, that brings the conversation to a whole, in that we're able to understand it in ways that we have never been able to do before because of modern technologies.
And the critical thinking aspect of it, right? This is how it applies to my life. It's not just, here's a page, names, places, dates, walk away, right?
Yeah.
How does it apply?
Yes, you have so many other examples that are so meaningful to apply to your life and scenarios and all of that, and of course, as the instructor, I can tailor some of that as well, where maybe I don't want the whole library of the world opened up to my students, but maybe I, on the back end, build an AI chatbot and I give 3 different examples of that Romeo and Juliet rather than an endless ability for that. Or maybe I have my other students write those examples for other students. So that comes back to just teaching and learning practices. What do I want the students to walk away from at the end of this? And then I can do the fun part of teaching and learning and figure out how do I get that message to the students to get them by the end of this course to walk away with that knowledge.
That's exciting. It is exciting you talked about earlier about bringing things to life, things that make it interesting. And with that in mind, we're talking about technology and how we can use it in higher ed. What do you think the role of this California community colleges, of the CVC, and teachers at the community college level? What do you think these 3 levels, our roles are in helping our students, better supporting our students to learn, adapt to, and utilize these new technologies for their own successes? And things are going to come up, right? AI is the latest thing. Something else is going to be next year and a half, something else. What do you think our roles are across those 3 levels?
I think if we look back over the past even 10, 15 years of my career, the conversation started when I was a student, in that you need to know how to use Microsoft products, because if you do not use Microsoft Word, that is what the industry uses. And if you don't know how to use Microsoft Word, you will not be successful in any sort of business that ever has existed. And then fast forward a few years, this product called Google comes out, and we learn about Google Docs, but you still had a lot of faculty that said, nope, they need to use the Microsoft version of this. And eventually I came to the conclusion that it's, to me, like a rental car. So whether you're talking about Apple products, Pages, you're talking about Microsoft products, you're talking about Google products, at the end of this conversation, all of it comes back together like a rental car, in that within 5 minutes, I'm able to navigate. The important thing was that I knew the baseline for, okay, I need to know how to put this thing in Drive, and all 3 of those platforms have the similar Drive function. I need to know how to turn this thing on. All of them have a similar, but the buttons are in a different way. So therefore, within 10, 15 minutes of being in this new job, and I find out they're a Google district or a Microsoft district, I'm able to navigate the technology. Of course, there's always some nuances to each of those that are really in depth, but at least I have a baseline understanding and I'm able to navigate. And so that's one example, but I think we as a system have that opportunity to have that same forethought with our students now, in that the ship probably has sailed on saying, you won't use AI in your career, so just disregard it. Let that pass. It's just a fad. It's not going to actually exist once you're out of college. It will exist. It just is probably going to exist on steroids at that point, because it's going to continue to evolve. So our job really is to take some of these types of technologies and figure out ways to integrate them into our teaching and learning practices, to then give our students the ability to trial some of these technologies so they can have success when they get out of college and into careers a few years from now. And so we already see that some of these technologies are going to be here for a long time. AI, extended realities are growing immensely. So it wouldn't serve our students if we didn't talk about these in the classroom now. And so that's really someone like myself, it's my job to give faculty members, employees of the California Community College system, the tools that they need to be able to have these conversations so they understand the technology to then be able to support our students. Because as we talked about earlier, not all of the jobs are even created yet that our students are going to have, and we don't know what that looks like. And so we do know some of the technologies that they're going to be using, though. So let's harness what we do know and provide that platform so our students are prepared for the future.
So as you talked about the different levels, that's very theoretical, broad. And we're thinking about this. I'm the teacher. I'm in the classroom every day with my 30 students, 5 to 7 classes. AI is coming at me. What are some advice? What are some things that the CVC can help me with? Because I need to learn this to better support my students.
That's a great question. So really, the most important thing is to, number one, have an open mind. And that goes for any sort of professional development, any sort of learning. I think you need to have that open mind to really understand what the technologies are that are available to you. It's important to understand the direction of your district in terms of what you're utilizing, what platforms currently exist. It's amazing how many times we get broken into silos within our districts, and there already is a department that's utilizing that tool. So take the opportunity to, some evening when you're sitting on the couch, pull up an article, read the Cliff Notes about that tool. Try to figure out some of these aspects. Ask your students, what tools are you using and how are you using them? You can learn so much from asking your students how they're applying this type of knowledge. For the California Virtual Campus, our trainings, we are doing a lot of trainings around AI, trying to take some of this theoretical and get it to the practical. So providing speakers that are providing practical knowledge, some examples of how they've used this in their classrooms already. I think since we're at the forefront of it, now is the time to be a learner again, think through this, play around with some of these tools, be willing to fail. There is nothing wrong with failure. Failure gets a bad rap sometimes because nobody likes to fail, but hopefully you have a supportive environment that allows you to fail. Try it, work with your students, be vulnerable with your students, have these conversations with them. Hey, this is my first time ever using an AI tool. I'm going to screw it up. Oops, I asked the wrong question and it gave me an inappropriate response. Laugh it off and move forward. So really look to colleagues, talk to your students, pull up some webinars, just whatever you can do to embrace learning. Now is a perfect time and a perfect topic. AI, ask the AI itself. I think that's an amazing opportunity that we don't take advantage of. This is a tool where you can just say, hey, what can you do for me? And it's going to give you an answer. You might not like the answer, but if you don't like the answer, reword your prompt and it'll give you a new answer. And so there's a lot of good examples out there for some starter kits just for 10 questions you can ask AI. And so if you just Google something like that, it's going to give you some practical knowledge where then you're going to start seeing the use cases and the light bulbs are going to start going off in your head like, oh, I could use it for that. Oh, I didn't even think about, I could use it for that. Oh, I have these 15 ingredients in front of me. I just typed in all 15 ingredients and said, what should I make with this? Boom, it's able to do that. Oh, I found this little button last night that's even cooler in that you can just hold your camera over the 15 ingredients and I didn't even have to type all 15 anymore. And it gave me the same answer. And so the only way you're going to be able to do that is trial and error, practicing it, failing at it, making that really bad meal by scanning those 15 items And so maybe don't invite your in-laws over for dinner on that night, or maybe that is the perfect time to do it. That's totally a personal decision. But really, be vulnerable, think outside of the box, utilize some of these tools, and I think you're going to see some really cool things that come from it. And this technology is only advancing. So when we have this conversation 2 years from now, I can't wait to look back on this and say, wow, that technology, we didn't even think about that at the time. And that's the exciting thing about technology, is it's always going to continue to emerge.
I'm thinking about our geography as well, where we are, and having so many of our tech companies, right, in the Silicon Valley. Does that give California community colleges an advantage because we're right there?
I think what you're going to see over the next few years out of the California community college system as a whole are some amazing partnerships with industry, unlike anything before. And that's my personal belief. Just because of that geographical location, we're able to pilot some of these things. And also we have such a large reach as the California community college system as a whole, that we're going to do some really cool things with creating partnerships that then impact our students in a positive manner, help our faculty, help our staff, our administrators in ways that we haven't thought about before. And that's really what technology is able to do. And so you're exactly right. With our location to some of these companies, we can have some firsthand assistance of implementation. So hopefully we'll take advantage of some of those partnerships.
That is wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for all the time you've given us. Dr. Garrick Grace, we really, really appreciate you, and we appreciate your time and your amazing insight.
Well, Dr. Jones, I greatly appreciate you having me today. It was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to catch up in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Innovating Higher Ed podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing and sharing it with your colleagues and friends. Be sure to join us for our next episode as we boldly explore new frontiers in educational innovation. We would like to thank one of our founding supporters for this episode, the largest system of higher education in the nation, the California Community Colleges.